Okay, so you know how we were saying stress can totally mess with your cycle? Well, get this. There's some seriously cool science behind that.
Yeah, it's wild.
Today, we are diving deep, and I mean deep into ovulation.
It really is fascinating stuff, honestly, when you really get down to it.
Oh, absolutely. And like you were saying earlier, understanding this stuff, it's like unlocking like a secret code for your body.
Exactly.
And we're going way beyond just like the textbook definitions here,
Oh,
right?
no, sure.
We're talking about those aha moments you get from really digging into the research.
Totally.
Like in your case, how the heck stress even knows to mess with your ovulation?
Right. Like, how does it even know?
Ready to unpack this?
Oh, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay, so first things first, before we get to the stress connection, and trust me, we're going to get there, let's make sure we're all on the same page about what ovulation actually is.
Okay, so at its core, ovulation is the release of a mature egg from one of your ovaries. Think of it like, like a super selective audition process where only one contender out of like hundreds, sometimes even thousands, gets chosen each month.
Hundreds,
Yeah.
thousands, wow, okay. No wonder things can get a little, irregular sometimes.
Right.
So this chosen one egg, what's its deal? What happens to it?
Well, that egg kind of just hangs out ready for action, in the fallopian tube, but only for a pretty short window of time. We're talking about 12 to 24 hours.
Oh, wow.
If it doesn't meet a sperm during that time, it's like curtains for this round of baby making.
12 to 24 hours. Oh, man, talk about pressure. No wonder you marked that article about, like, pinpointing your fertile window.
Right.
It's a small window.
Speaking of which, how does the body even know when to release the egg?
Yeah?
It's not like we've got, like, little calendars down in our ovaries.
That's where things get really, really interesting, actually. It's all about hormones, specifically, FSH and LH.
Okay.
They're like a two-part signal that basically sets this whole ovulation process in motion. Okay, FSH, LH.
Yeah.
Okay, those names always sounded, I don't know, like alphabet soup to me.
Right?
Can you break it down?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, what do these hormones actually do?
Okay, so imagine this. FSH is like the casting director in our little audition analogy here.
I like it.
It goes into the ovary at the beginning of your cycle and starts telling all the follicles. Those are the little sacs where the eggs hang out, by the way.
Okay.
It's like, start prepping, start practicing, get ready for the big show.
Okay, so FSH is like, all right, everybody on stage, let's do this thing. What happens next?
So as these follicles are all prepping, they start releasing estrogen. Now, estrogen is key because it tells your brain how the auditions are going.
Okay.
And as one follicle starts to, kind of stand out, that's our star, the one that's going to get ovulated, its estrogen levels, they rise. So when those estrogen levels hit that sweet spot,
It's go time.
exactly. It's like the brain says, cue the music, it's LH time.
Love it.
LH surges, right. And it's like this final curtain call for that star follicle. It bursts open and boom, the egg's released. Ta-da! Ovulation!
It really makes you appreciate the whole process, all that for this tiny little egg to make its grand debut. But, okay, back to the stress thing for a sec. You actually highlighted something in one of your articles about how, like, a chronic stress can actually disrupt this whole hormonal symphony we've got going on.
Oh, absolutely. It's incredible, how interconnected our bodies are. When we're like really stressed out, like chronically stressed, our bodies produce cortisol. That's that fight or flight hormone.
Nice,
And
yeah.
guess what?
Right.
Cortisol can actually like mess with the production of FSH and LH.
Oh, wow. So it's like stress is telling those hormones, those crucial hormones, to like take a back seat while it deals with like this perceived emergency.
Exactly.
No wonder our bodies are like, okay, we're putting ovulation on hold, when we're just constantly frazzled.
Yeah, it's all about like resource allocation. Your body is really smart. Like if it senses that you're under a lot of stress, it might decide that, now is not the best time to bring a new life into the world.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And speaking of smart bodies, let's talk about the signs and symptoms of ovulation that you were like curious about. You even flagged that study comparing different methods for tracking ovulation.
Oh, right. Yeah, that was super interesting to see, how much variation there is between people.
Oh, yeah.
But there are some, like, common themes. One of the most reliable signs is a change in your cervical mucus.
Okay.
In the days leading up to ovulation, it becomes, like, clear, stretchy, slippery, almost like raw egg white.
Okay, so that whole egg white comparison is like legit.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's the perfect, consistency to help sperm, like, swim up to the egg.
Wow, that's wild.
Yeah, and then there's your basal body temperature, BBT.
Right.
Right after ovulation, your temperature tends to rise a little bit, just slightly due to progesterone.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard of like BBT charting and stuff, but honestly, it seems like a lot of work.
It can be. You have to be very, consistent with taking your temperature first thing in the morning before you even get out of bed. But, it can be really helpful for some women, especially when they combine it with other tracking methods,
Okay.
like cervical mucus monitoring or ovulation predictor kits, those
Right.
OPKs.
Yeah, those OPKs you mentioned, those tests for that LH surge, right?
Exactly. Yeah, they can detect that surge in LH that happens about 24 to 36 hours before ovulation.
Wow.
They can be a really helpful tool if you're trying to, pinpoint your most fertile window.
So it's like a heads up from your body, like, hey, ovulation is imminent.
Exactly.
Talk about like really getting to know your cycle. But let's be real for a sec. Not everyone ovulates like clockwork, right?
Yeah.
You even bookmarked that section in the article about like common ovulation disorders.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Irregular ovulation is way more common than people realize. In fact, it's actually one of the leading causes of infertility.
Wow.
Really?
That's huge.
Yeah.
And there are ways to actually address this, right? Like, I know you're not a medical doctor or anything, but I'm guessing that's where like ovulation induction and suppression come in, like we were kind of talking about earlier.
Precisely. Yeah. Ovulation induction is often used for women who are having a hard time conceiving because they're not, ovulating regularly.
So it's about like giving ovulation a little nudge in the right direction. How does that even work?
Well, there are a few different, approaches. Some medications like clomiphene, that's when they work by encouraging your body to produce more FSH and LH.
Okay.
It's like giving your pituitary gland a pep talk.
I like it, a little motivational speech for your hormones. Okay, so that's one. What other options are out there?
Well, there are also injectable hormones called gonadotropins, which they act directly on the ovaries to stimulate follicle development. And then there's letrozole. That one's interesting. It was actually initially developed as a breast cancer drug, believe it or not.
Oh, wow.
But it's shown to be really effective in inducing ovulation as well.
Hmm.
It's really amazing what science can do these days. But what about when you're actually trying to avoid pregnancy? That's where ovulation suppression comes in.
Right, right. Like hormonal birth control and stuff, right?
Exactly.
That's about more than just prevent pregnancy too, right? Like I know it has other applications.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, hormonal birth control, whether it's the pill, the patch, or, hormonal IUDs, they work by suppressing ovulation.
Right.
But like you were saying, it's often prescribed to manage other conditions too,
Right.
like endometriosis, PCOS, even acne sometimes.
It's like a whole other side to this like whole ovulation puzzle, right?
Totally.
It's not just about making babies or not,
Right.
It's about understanding how this whole process, it like influences our overall health and well-being, really.
I couldn't agree more. It's all connected. Which actually brings us back to that study you found on cycle tracking and self-advocacy. That was really interesting.
Yeah.
It really highlights how empowering this knowledge can be, even beyond just family planning.
Oh, yeah, for sure. That study, I don't know, it really resonated with me. Like they found that women who, they knew more about their cycles like we're talking about here, they felt way more confident talking to their doctors.
Absolutely.
Like even asking for, specific tests or treatments.
It makes total sense when you think about it, right?
Yeah.
The more you understand your own body, the better equipped you are to advocate for, your own health.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
It's like instead of just being like, hey, my period's weird this month, you can like walk in with specific observations.
Right.
You're like, okay, so my cervical mucus is doing this, or my BBT hasn't like spiked when it normally does.
Exactly. Yeah, it shifts the whole dynamic.
Yeah.
You're not just passively receiving information, you're actively participating in your own healthcare.
It's like you become your own health detective.
Yes.
Speaking of, any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up here?
Yeah.
Before we send them out into the world, armed with all this ovulation intel.
Let me see. I would say, honestly, the biggest takeaway here is that knowledge is power. Even though we've covered a ton today,
I know, right? We've gone deep.
this is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to truly understanding your cycle. It's really a lifelong journey of, discovery.
Exactly.
So keep asking questions, keep tracking, keep learning, and never be afraid to advocate for yourself.
I love it. Well said. And to our amazing listeners, we hope this deep dive has, empowered you to better understand your amazing bodies. Until next time, keep exploring.